my thing, and this maybe going a little bit back, but you were talking about like, why isn't it Muhammad or another relief, or maybe one belief, or maybe one that doesn't even exist already?
Right.
For me, I gotta ask, like, what makes you so certain that these gospels are accurate tellings of what happened?
Great question. You are a thinker, and I appreciate it a lot. All right, you're right. How do we know that the Jesus we read about in the Gospels was a real historical person? Why do you trust the Gospels?
First thing is that born and raised, I'm an atheist.
Yep.
Like, I have never had faith in a higher power during my life.
Right.
I do not have faith in the Bible as a source. What proof do you have outside of that?
Good. The first piece of evidence, not proof, but the first piece of evidence that points me to God is order and design do not come out of chaos by chance.
Right.
Order and design point to some type of intelligent mind.
Biology student myself.
Yes.
I'm a firm believer in kind of principles of evolution.
Good.
That kind of thing.
Let me just hop quickly on though.
Yeah.
Where is the creative mechanism in evolution? Because I believe in evolution as a process, but where is the creative mechanism in evolution?
I don't think I fully understand the question, but
How do you get something from nothing in evolution?
the thing is that it didn't come from nothing. I forgot what the exact title of the experiment, but there is this idea that the primordial soup, right?
Yeah.
The oceans of a primordial Earth with
Sir, I think we can bring this one to a conclusion fairly quickly. I am convinced that before the Big Bang, there was nothing.
right.
Okay, and that's what Einstein acknowledged. And that's why Einstein tried to beat the Big Bang mathematically.
I see.
And he introduced a fudge factor to try and prove that the Big Bang was not true. Because Einstein understood, if the Big Bang is true, my pantheism, which means everything is God, is wrong. There's a creator. Because everything that has a beginning has a cause. The universe has a beginning, therefore the universe has a cause, and it's far more reasonable to believe in the beginning an intelligent mind caused it than to believe nothing caused it.
Right.
And that's philosophically unacceptable. Bang! What caused that? Nothing. That is stupidity. Rank stupidity. Everything that has a beginning has a cause. The universe has a beginning, therefore the universe has a cause. What is the best answer to the question, who caused the universe?
In that case, it would be God. Right?
Yeah, God is the most reasonable explanation.
Then, what is our explanation for the beginning of God?
Great question. It is idolatry to think God has a beginning. Because the God who has revealed himself through Jesus Christ has revealed himself as eternal. So when I begin to say, well, who created God? It means I don't understand who God has revealed himself to be. Nobody created God because God does not have a beginning. Remember, I didn't say everything has a cause. I said everything that has a beginning has a cause. God is eternal, so God does not have a cause. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And in that case, that's kind of my view for, well, existence itself without a creator. Because God does not have a cause,
Right?
and, well, we exist, so how is it so much more to believe that existence itself does not have a cause?
Because existence cannot come out of non-existence.
But God can.
No, God doesn't come out of anything. See, there's nothing before God that God comes out of, because God is eternal. No beginning, no end. But everything that has a beginning, like this guy and me, there's got to be a cause for him and me, because we definitely have a beginning. And we're getting a little older, so we're not going to be around a lot longer, okay? But we have a beginning, which means there's got to be a cause for this dude and for this dude. Make sense?
Of course.
Good. Well, I thank you for that, okay? All right, now quickly, let's just go through some other pieces of evidence of why we believe God exists.
Of course.
Moral absolutes. I'm convinced to the root of my being that if this guy pulls out a knife and sticks it in your body,
Right.
that is absolutely wrong, because this man is violating your value.
Of course.
Now, the only way you can have value is if someone created you. Because if nobody created you, you just happened by accident. Which means any value you have is either you gave it to yourself, or I gave it to you and some powerful people, or your culture did.
Right.
Right?
And
But I would argue that it's still relative. The reason I'm convinced that if he sticks a knife into you, it's evil, is because you have innate value that comes from your creator, who created you for a purpose and who really loves you. Third one is moral absolutes, objective morals pointing to some type of creator. Fourth one is this: your rational mind. Does it come from the non-rational, or does it come from the rational? An atheist is someone who says, my rational mind comes from the non-rational. I can't... That doesn't make any sense. The rational comes from the rational. The rational does not come from the irrational, which is why, not that I've proven God, but it's evidence that it's more reasonable to say we come from God, not that we come from the non-rational.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I believe so. Define the rational and the non-rational. I don't think I understand where we come.
All right. You have the ability, and hopefully I have the ability, to think rationally. All right? That is why, if I make a rational mistake, you're going to look me in the face and say, Cliff, that makes no sense.
Right.
That's irrational. Okay, my ability to think rationally comes from rational being. It doesn't come from this. This has no ability to rationalize. Neither does that tree.
Of course.
But you and I do. So is it more reasonable to think that our ability to reason comes from a rational being, God, or is it more reasonable to believe that our rational talent comes from the non-rational, just from matter and energy?
This is difficult for me because I just see us on different wavelengths, honestly. Like, we do believe different things. Apparently.
Yes, we believe different things.
And
You'll be next.
just for these pieces of evidence, I see these coming from not a higher power, but from necessity. From necessity.
Well, what does that mean?
Because, say, coming from my point of view, every piece of a human comes from a piece of, like, every piece of a human is part of necessity and gives someone more chance of survival. So, say our morality. I see you didn't like that. Say morality. If you were to stab me, say we're part of the same tribe.
Yeah?
Ancient human.
Yeah?
If he were to stab me while we were out, say, gathering berries, he can't. The tribe has lost a member.
Yeah?
We can't have as many berries now, and he can't carry back as much food. Perhaps now, even then, my parents are going to be mad at him, and the tribe breaks apart. Like, equals less survival and less humans.
Maybe. Does rape help the human experiment continue?
No.
Yes, it does. Rape can produce babies.
Yes, but
Survival of the fittest. Why should I not steal his backpack? If survival of the fittest is true, why should I not steal his backpack?
Well, the thing is that you're part of the same tribe.
So what?
We're part of the same society. That doesn't benefit anybody. If you are of different tribes, that isn't necessarily immoral, at least in the human perspective.
No. If what you say is true, then if I want to be part of a gang, and the gang says, in order to be part of our tribe, our gang, you got to go out and murder. Does that make me going out and murder good?
No,
Thank you.
because that's unnecessary murder of people in the same city, the same tribe.
No. I want to be part of a gang, which is a tribe, a family. And in order to be part of a gang, they're telling me I got to go out and murder. My desire to be part of a tribe, the tribe defining good and evil. Is that really objective morality? Is that really make it good because the tribe says it's good?
No.
Thank you. Which is why you and I need to acknowledge God exists, because God's character, which is just, defines murder as being wrong. I don't care what gang or what tribe or what nation, be it Nazi Germany or whatever, says it's good. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, good. So I need to move on to another person, but I cannot thank you enough for your respectful thinking, and I appreciate it a lot.
First thing you do when you wake up in the morning, if you're checking your phone, stop that. Instead, try this technique from the mind science pioneer, Jose Silva. You see, when we're awake, our brain is at what is called beta, the waking level. But when we wake up in the morning, our brain is actually at a different altered state of mind called the alpha frequency. At the alpha frequency, you can command your body to heal itself. At the alpha frequency, you can program your subconscious to remove.
How come Matthew can be an eyewitness account if it quotes Mark, an earlier source, I think it was 25% of it's quoted from Mark.
Yeah.
How does that make that an eyewitness account rather than just another biography from the time period?
You bet. The overwhelming evidence is, due to the writings of the early church fathers, that Matthew wrote Matthew, Mark wrote Mark, Luke wrote Luke, and John wrote John, in spite of the fact that you're very accurate. The original manuscripts, the earliest manuscripts that we have, do not have at the start the gospel according to Matthew, the gospel according to Mark. Okay, that was added. So you make a great point. But the eyewitnesses in the first century, and those who knew the eyewitnesses, insisted these gospels were written by these people. But even if they're wrong, it doesn't change the fact that the eyewitness community accepted Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John as historically reliable. Now, I like the way you're dressed.
Thank you, thank you.
Stuart has 3 daughters. They're my granddaughters, his daughters. Now, we're going to tell them, they're not here right now, but we're going to tell them about the privilege we had of talking with you.
Oh, thank you.
He's going to describe you, and I'm going to describe you. Our descriptions are not going to be precisely the same, right? He's going to give perspectives about how you nodded your head. Maybe I will about how we shook hands, about the green suit. Okay? All right? And they're not going to be identical descriptions. That doesn't mean we're contradicting each other. See, what is an eyewitness account? It's a unique perspective. I'm going to talk to my wife tonight, who's up in Connecticut, and I'm going to tell her about you. Now, I'm going to include certain details, but exclude others. Stuart will include certain details and exclude others. If we are telling identical accounts of you, we probably were colluding. We probably were working together and saying, okay, this is exactly what we want to say about this dude.
Okay.
Who had a lot of guts to dress the way he did and come out here. And I like that. I respect that, okay? So, Matthew gives a unique perspective, Mark a unique perspective, Luke and John. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
What do you think about Christ?
What do I think Christ is an interesting, well, exactly with his specific claims, I think they vary a lot, gospel to gospel, like you were saying. I think John, it's very clear. He says, before Abraham was, I am.
Yes.
Very clearly saying, I am, me and God are equal, I and the Father are one.
Yes.
When you go back to a much earlier manuscript like Mark, it's these claims are wildly different. Now, you can mine, if you read deeply into the text, you can get Jesus saying, I am God, but it's much harder to get in these older gospels. And over time, in my opinion, I feel like these claims seem to grow in clearness and extravagance of who Jesus is over time.
Okay.
So I think the earlier gospels leave it way more up to interpretation about who Jesus is.
Okay.
Than the later accounts of his life.
Okay. Here's why I disagree. Please read Philippians chapter 2. Written probably in the late 40s, early 50s, before the Gospels. Paul unequivocally says, have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, although he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, becoming a bondservant. Then you read in Colossians chapter 1, Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. Once again, written in the late 40s, early 50s, before the Gospels. So you see, sir, my point is, regardless of how far back you push the historical record, you never come up against a non-supernatural Jesus. Jesus is worshipped as God right from the get-go. So the whole idea that has been taught on American university campuses, that you've done well articulating, which is later followers of Christ deified Christ, is false. Because when you push the record back right into the 40s, early 50s, you never bump into a non-supernatural Jesus. Does that make sense?
Yes. I'm curious, though, why you would think an account like John would be so clear with it, though, why an account like Mark would make it makes it much harder to read in the text. Why do you think that is?
I do not know.
Fair enough.
Why John wrote the way he did, why Matthew and Mark and Luke wrote the way they did. But I do know that if you read the Gospels, like Mark chapter 2, Jesus forgives the sins of a man he'd never probably seen before, who's lowered on a mat to his feet. And all the religious people, after Jesus says your sins are forgiven, shrink back saying, oh, time out. Only God can forgive sin.
That's right.
Who does this Jesus think he is? By claiming the right to forgive the sins of the paralytic, Jesus is claiming to be God. So it's not just his words, but it's also his actions where Jesus claims to be God. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that's actually I thought about the forgiving sins thing, but now that you're talking about it that way, now you might totally embarrass me.
Now I'm going to interrupt you.
Yeah.
You are a delight to talk to, man.
Man, you are too. I dreamed about talking to you for so long. I've seen you on YouTube.
Sorry to hear that.
Like, you know, the rug cleaning videos. And I'm like, man, I go to this university. I want to talk to Cliff one day. And now I'm hearing this alien costume. I do got one more question for you. That's all.
Oh, no, you keep going, man. I interrupted you. You got the floor. Go for it.
Okay, so Joshua 6.
Wait, I'm going to make one more comment.
Yeah, of course.
I got frustrated yesterday, right? I meet this one guy on the sidewalk. He says, "Oh, I've seen your stuff on YouTube." And I said, "Okay, great." I said, he said, "But I don't agree with you. I'm not a believer in Christ." I said, "Okay, fine. Can you come out tomorrow and ask questions?" He said, "No." I said, "Excuse me, why can't you ask questions?" He said, "Because you've been doing this a lot longer than I have. So it wouldn't be a fair, really, debate." That's scary.
Yeah.
That is really scary. If you're so close-minded that you can't have an intelligent discussion about something, you are a narrow-minded person. So that's part of why I thank you.
Thank you.
So keep going.
So Joshua 6, this is, Joshua brings the walls tumbling down
Yeah.
of Jericho.
Yeah.
And it explicitly says that he killed every man, woman, child, and animal, and he dedicated the city to the Lord, and the Lord was with him. I have the quotes with me, but I think, is that about accurate, Joshua?
Well, wait a second. You have hyperbole in a lot of those passages. And the reason we know that is because often in later passages in Joshua or in Judges, we read that these Amalekites, these Canaanites, these Philistines, there's still a bunch of them running around. So no, they didn't literally kill everybody, but yes, they did kill some.
Yeah.
Not only that, when you study Jericho, you begin to realize that was probably a fortress.
Yeah, they found the actual ruins of the city.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So no, it's not like the Israelites are going in and just saying, "Okay, here's a kid, let's cut his head off." No. No, they're going in and they're trying to move people out of the promised land who are trying to tempt them away from God.
And I see that, and that's definitely, so for me, this seems like this is just sort of an early Iron Age account of a siege and a city being taken.
Yep.
And that's pretty accurate with other communities similar.
Yes.
But this is the Bible, and God is supposed to be a figure above these human moralities. I just don't, there's no condemnation that comes from God, and the Bible even says the Lord was with him. Thou shalt not kill. Where's this condemnation of Joshua for what he did, which is, by all accounts, pretty immoral towards these civilians?
Very good. So I think at the root of your question is God allowed to judge? What do you think?
Supposedly he made us, so I'd say he has a pretty good chance to judge.
Very good. Because he made us, he's in a position where for him to judge us is fair. Okay? Now, if he chooses to judge me for the wrong that I've done, is there something wrong with that?
No.
Exactly. No. Because he's the one who gave me life, he's in a position to judge me. Second point, if some guy comes up to you and smacks you, steals your backpack, and I say to the guy, "Hey, let's go to Starbucks." Why is that so horrendous?
I'd have my feelings definitely hurt. That's got all my stuff in there.
You really? Okay, the reason though I would argue that it would be so horrendous is if I love you and you get beaten up, and I say to the guy who beats you up, "Let's go to Starbucks," it means I don't love you, you don't matter. The dude can beat you to a pulp, and I really just want to go to Starbucks. See the problem with that?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so people who understand that break down in their thinking when it comes to God. They basically think that God is a nice Santa Claus who never keeps a naughty list and everybody's cool. And God never judges. No, it's because God loves us. It's because we matter to God that God judges.
Yes.
Does that make any sense?
So you're saying he judged the people of Jericho?
Yes.
And I'm kind of with you on that with the adult males there, but what about, it specifically says children were killed, and this happens in wars all the time.
Yes.
I can't get my head around that. Those children didn't do anything.
You bet. It's a hard issue, very hard. I agree with you 100%. Okay, now, in our culture, it's all about I'm responsible for my life, you're responsible for your life, and there's no mix-up.
Yes.
But we're beginning to study children of alcoholics. We're beginning to study children of divorce. And all of a sudden, we're beginning to realize, oh no, what mom and dad decided had tremendous repercussions in their children's lives, in their grandchildren's lives. So this whole idea that what I do is just my business, it doesn't influence you, and what you do is just your business, it doesn't influence me, is a crock.
Certainly, certainly.
Right? So the Bible never says that those children are guilty of anything, but it does say that God judged the people of Jericho, different people groups who had rebelled against him, and yes, innocent people were swept along in the judgment. But that's also true of Noah's flood, the flood at Noah's,
Certainly,
Noah's time, right? I mean, you bet. Because we're more interconnected than we would like to admit, innocent people are swept along in the judgment.
I mean, I guess it's me, just a simple alien man, to say God should have judged Joshua for this.
Yes.
The thing is, it said the Lord was with him after that, and for me, it just seems like this is like an account written by a human. It doesn't feel divinely inspired that there would be any repercussions for his attacking of civilians and children.
Yes. Okay, but please remember that a couple hundred years after that, God used first the Assyrians, who were a horribly barbaric people, and then the Babylonians, a horribly barbaric people, to judge the Jews. Now, why did God judge? Because both the Canaanites and then the Jews, both the residents of Canaan and the Jewish people, got to the point where they were saying, if you want to know God, have sex with a temple prostitute. And if you really want to get to know God, take your baby, put it on an altar, and sacrifice it to God. And God said, enough. If you do that kind of evil, it's time for me to judge you. And he judged them. Now, it once again gets back to this whole issue of free will.
Yes.
Haul back, smack you. Okay, now wait, God, why don't you put plexiglass in between here so that my fist goes there and then bounces off? Because God has chosen to limit his power by giving us a free will, which means he's not going to put plexiglass here every time and my fist is going to bounce off. Instead, it could be that I would swing through, hurt you, and that's evil on my part. Okay? See, so it's this whole issue of expectations of an all-powerful God. What's an all-powerful God supposed to do? Put plexiglass here? Now, when he judges a people group, you're right. Innocent people are going to be swept along in that judgment. We cringe over that. I cringe over it. You cringe over it. And that's appropriate. And that's why we look forward to the return of Christ, when there will be a day of judgment, when injustice will be punished, and innocent people who've been raked over the coals will be lifted up. That's why this return of Christ is so important, because on that day, justice will really rule.
And in Revelations, where it talks about the return of Christ, it seems to imply that much more people will also be swept up in this, right? There will be years
all of us
of torment. And I'm actually curious, what do you think about this idea of, what do they call it, the rapture? I seem to think that's not really in the text at all of Revelation. What's your opinion?
I like your point. Stuart, how do you think through the rapture?
I think through the rapture is it's predominantly metaphorical, but I have many close friends who believe that it's literal. So however Jesus is going to return and however he's going to reveal himself, I think everybody will have clearly a fair opportunity to see him and encounter him. So no, you as an atheist, I wouldn't focus too much so on the rapture. I'd focus more so on who exactly was Christ. And don't forget, these children that you're worried about, who I'm worried about as well, who are swept up into war and the atrocities of it, there's simply a change of location when it comes to heaven. Now, it's a painful one, obviously, for many of them. But don't forget as well, in an ancient Near Eastern culture, a lot of these children and kids were abused in a horrible type of way. And so some historical scholars would say it's actually more of a gracious type of action. Now, I have a tough time getting my head around that one as well. And yet at the same time, how do we expect, with our 21st century American, very American cultural lens, how do we want God to operate back in that day and age? Because so often it's, oh, I'm a white Westerner. Obviously, I know what human rights should look like. So God, you should have been operating thousands of years ago exactly in this kind of way. While those traditional cultures, over in China, for example, in the Near East, they would say, what's your problem? You have a problem with children being swept along into judgment? Are you playing God? What's wrong with that? And they would have more so of an issue with, well, my ancestry, I want them all to be in heaven, but they might not all be Christians. So you see how these cultural issues really have a lot to do with where we were born.
Oh, certainly.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I totally see what you're saying, but I definitely do take a bit of an issue with what you're saying, like that it might have been a grace for these children, because unfortunately there are cults today where children are being horrifically abused, and I don't think them dying would be a grace for that. And that's not necessarily what you're saying, but if we put that into the modern day, God doesn't necessarily command Joshua to do this, but he dedicates it to the Lord, and the Lord doesn't say, I don't know. That's just like a big issue
Well, and God, don't forget, in a humane kind of way, these civilizations would come overnight, like a thief in the night, and just wipe people out. We saw in the ancient Eastern culture. But Jesus Christ, specifically God in the Old Testament, was oftentimes getting 400 years, or hundreds of years as well, back all the way in Genesis 6 and before, with the flood. You're about to get stung here. Let me get you.
Oh, thank you.
So I think it's important to remember, yet again, with our humane, focus on humanity and how we want people to be treated. Okay, well, God was very gracious, more gracious than most societies back then, for sure, when it came to the issue of slavery as well. I mean, you were to be put to death if you went and stole another person to put them into slavery.
Yeah.
So God is working with people. He's showing his grace, but at the same time, he's saying, turn from your evil ways. Now, I don't think it's true love. Back to my dad's point earlier. If he never shows justice, if he never has a type of judgment and just allow these people to continue in their evil ways with all different forms of prostitution, bestiality, on and on down the line, how is that really loving and guiding people along to a higher moral order? I don't think it is. I think that's unloving. See, we always ram against God and say, oh, he judged a people group. We hate him for that. He's not a loving God. But then he doesn't judge at other times, and we say, oh, he's not a good God because he let the evil get away with certain things. Do you see our double standard when it comes to judging God's moral character?
I certainly, and I'm with you basically on all of it, except for when it comes with the children that were slaughtered in Jericho. And it's just, I don't know, it's just not, your points are well taken, but it just is not sitting for me that these children obviously do not deserve any judgment whatsoever. Because they were born into that, right? And it's like, I just don't see how it was moral for
So a terrorist in a home over in Iraq. Let's get real ethically gray here for a second.
Let's do it.
If his kids are in that house, but he's planning to blow up an entire city the next day, and he has the finger on the button himself, are you going to kill that terrorist, and unfortunately his two children are going to be swept along to protect the entire city that he's going to blow up? Or are you going to say, nope, his two kids are in there, we can't drop that bomb, and I'm sorry, the 10,000 people in that city, they're going to die? See, I think it's not clear, but yet at the same time, I understand why you would go the direction of, nope, his two kids will be swept along with him.
That's an interesting and difficult point, I guess. For what you're saying is only the divine can make those.
Well, and just to finish with it, David, when he has the sinful relationship with Bathsheba, an adulterous relationship, he murders to get there her husband Uriah by putting him at the very front lines of the war. The baby is born, the baby dies. David says, I will go to be with him, he will not come to be with me, showing that children, especially in this case, born even out of sin, will be in heaven. So a child judged in that kind of way due to his father's sin as a terrorist, that child does not have moral culpability. And I believe that child will be in heaven, so a change of location.
Those Canaanite children likely will receive that.
Right,
correct.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now let me ask you, do you believe in God?
I want to say I'm more on the agnostics.
Yeah.
I'm open to the idea, but I need to do much more like kind of research into the Bible and stuff.
You bet. Okay, now here's why I don't think either you or I can be agnostic. All right? Cliff, do you prefer Coke or Pepsi? I don't know, I'm agnostic. Okay, no problem. Okay, is this man really here? I don't know, I'm agnostic. Right about now,
I want to stop being agnostic about it.
exactly, I have no choice.
Yes.
I have no choice but to make a decision. Are you really there? Does your face start there, or are you not there? So I can be agnostic about Coke or Pepsi, which is better, but I cannot be agnostic about whether you're here, especially when I'm doing this, right? My point is, you have to deal with the issue of, why are human beings valuable? Why are you valuable?
Yes.
You can't just say, well, I don't know, because you have to live your life and treat people a certain way each day, right?
Yes.
So you have to figure out, are people valuable, and if so, why? Secondly, you have to answer the question, is there a meaning or purpose to life? If there is no meaning and purpose to life, then who gives a rip? Thirdly, you have to make ethical decisions every day. Do I cheat on the exam? Do I not cheat on the exam? Do I tell a racist joke? Do I not tell a racist joke? Do I cheat the IRS or do I pay my taxes? See, you have to make ethical decisions. We all do. And to say I'm agnostic about God, you can't, because if there is no God, morality is relative. But if there is a God, it means there are possibly some objective morals. And then fourthly, you're going to have to, unfortunately, go to mom and dad's funeral or grandma and grandpa's funeral, and you're going to have to ask yourself the question, do I think that life after death is real or do I not? Do you see why I'm convinced that agnosticism is an impossibility when it comes to God? When it comes to Coke or Pepsi, no problem. But when it comes to God, you can't be agnostic because you got to live your life.
And that's a really interesting point. And I would say, certainly, if I had all the information on the table. Now, right now, this may be a bit of a cop-out. I'm still learning a crap ton about religion.
Good.
So I would like to think eventually I will come to a place where I make on a certain... but what I would say about that is the evidence for it is typically in the scriptures. Now, you could say scientifically that order comes out of disorder. There is some compelling evidence I've seen for that. But generally, what I see is a lot of most important. If Jesus really was who he said he is, he did these miracles to prove that. And what I'm curious about is why did these miracles kind of cease happening? Observable miracles like that at Pentecost.
Right.
I don't. Can you point to modern examples of these miracles?
Okay, good question. But remember now, we were talking about God.
Yes.
Not about Jesus.
Okay.
Right? We were talking, why is agnosticism an impossibility? And then you ask a great question. Well, fine, Cliff, but what's the evidence that some type of God exists? Yes. So we were atheism versus theism. Now you've raised the issue, okay, well, what about Jesus? Okay, it's a great point. But you see, the first issue you got to answer is there a supernatural God? And I'm convinced the evidence of order and design, pointing to a designer, moral absolutes, pointing to a lawgiver, reason, is it more rational for me to believe reason comes from non-reason? Or is it more reasonable for me to believe the rational mind comes from a rational mind, God? That's a no-brainer, guys. There's no evidence that a rational mind comes from the irrational or the non-rational. See, so it's because of evidence like that, like love. I'm convinced that I love you, not just because I want to preserve the genetic pool. And when a student at Duke told me that the reason Mother Teresa works among the dying in Calcutta, India, is because she wants to preserve the genetic pool, a lot of people laughed. I mean, that is absurd. No, we have the ability, all of us do, every atheist, agnostic, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, Jew, we all have this innate ability to genuinely love. So it's because of evidence like that, order and design. Chaos doesn't produce order. Order comes from an intelligent mind. Secondly, moral absolutes point to a moral lawgiver. Thirdly, love points to reality being bigger than just matter and energy. Because remember, an atheist is saying reality is no God, which means reality is matter and energy. I'm sorry, matter and energy don't produce love. It takes a human being with a free will to love. So it's because of evidence like that that I'm convinced God exists. But then the next question that you've gotten us to so beautifully is, well, who is this God? And that's where Muhammad and the avatars of Hinduism and Jesus Christ enter the picture. And the reason that I'm convinced that Jesus is speaking the truth when he claims to reveal God accurately is because historically, from the Gospels, his lifestyle, teachings, death, and resurrection point to his credibility. So that's why I trust Jesus. So remember, don't believe in God, because I sure don't believe in God, because the Bible says God exists. I don't believe God exists because any book tells me God exists. I believe God exists because the overwhelming evidence of my observation of reality is God is by far the best explanation for reality. Does that make any sense?
That's a really interesting, see, there are definitely things that point to something beyond this creating us. I definitely,
Bingo.
I know there's some, even like the Big Bang, I know there's a lot of, it was discovered by a lot of Catholic priests, so that's...
George Lemaitre.
Yeah, so very, my thing, and this may be going a little bit back, but you were talking about, like, why isn't it Muhammad or another belief, or maybe one belief, or maybe one that doesn't even exist already.
Right.
For me, I gotta ask, like, what makes you so certain that these Gospels are, accurate tellings of what happened?
Great question. You are a thinker, and I appreciate it a lot. All right, you're right. How do we know that the Jesus we read about in the Gospels was a real historical person? Why do you trust the Gospels? Because I have tests that I use to determine historicity claimed by any book. And I would encourage you to come up with your own tests. Obviously, there's nothing magical about my tests. My tests are for internal consistency. Are there contradictions within the text between the different eyewitnesses that point to massive confusion? No, when you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there are differences, as we talked about earlier, but there's a tremendous internal consistency. Second test, literary style. What is the literary style of the document? Or what's the literary style of the Iliad and the Odyssey?
Epic poetry.
Bingo. Precisely. The Iliad and the Odyssey are not historical narrative. They are epic poetry. The Gospels are not epic poetry. They are historical narrative. That's important, the literary style. Thirdly, archaeology. Are we talking about the island of Atlantis out in the ocean that none of us can verify? No. We're talking about Bethlehem, Nazareth, Jerusalem, Rome.
Yeah.
Archaeologically verifiable places. And then fourthly, good gracious, what's the manuscript evidence that we really have what the eyewitnesses wrote? And the New Testament that we have today in English is based on over 5,800 Greek manuscripts or pieces of manuscript dated from the 2nd through the 10th century AD.
Yes.
In fact, if we were to lose all of them, we wouldn't have a problem. Because the early church fathers between the 2nd and 4th century quote the New Testament 38,289 times. Every verse except 11 in the New Testament
very remarkably well
are quoted by these early church fathers. So we have such a plethora of evidence that we really have what Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote. We don't have the original autographs. The original manuscripts are either destroyed or we'll find them someday. But the overwhelming evidence is it's historically reliable, the New Testament that we have in English. Does that make any sense?
I think that's, and I mean, definitely as if like you say, these are historical accounts or secondary accounts like Mark and Luke are, then they are like as other Roman biographies from that period. I would take it as the genre of the Gospels as a biography.
Good.
A sort of, and I wouldn't say it's particularly unreliable. In fact, I would say if you look back at the earliest manuscripts, the changes are very minor with
Correct.
the earliest copies.
Correct.
But my question would be like, I don't think all of these Roman biographies are exactly accurate.
Good. Stuart, what would you say?
Well, this is connected to your earlier point. You talked about how we don't have the real Jesus. Well, then what Jesus do we have? Do we have the itinerant preacher who was just a good moral example? Well, it sounds like you're getting into the Jesus seminar of the 70s and the 80s, which has been largely debunked. What did they do? They got together and they said, oh, this Jesus that you have in the Gospels cannot be reliable. Because this Jesus went and did miracles. This Jesus went and claimed to be God. This Jesus went and resurrected from the grave. This Jesus we're going to have to do away with based off of scientific naturalism, because none of these things actually happened. And that's why you've been influenced by David Hume, probably more than you realized.
I've never heard of him, but probably.
Okay, so you have definitely been then. If you haven't heard of him, because he's had more influence on this campus and across the country more than we could ever realize.
Interesting.
And then Jesus Seminar came and said, no, this Jesus wasn't the one of the Gospels. No, it was more, he was a political figure. And so we're going to use him more so as a political figure to understand real politics. He was into social justice, and that was it. And then we're going to look at Christ in such a way where we don't want him to call us to higher standards. And so what did they do? They went and with their nice, beautiful red pen as a seminar, decided that less than 20% of what we have as Jesus' words in the Gospels were really him speaking.
You can't figure that. That's total. I'm totally with you on that. That's right.
I mean, my good. Okay, well, what's going on there? It's a presupposition they make. What is a presupposition? It's an acknowledgement that I'm saying I'm going to jump to this conclusion based off of no evidence. That's what they did. But we're going to say, but this is way more palatable. So let's just go ahead and do this. Well, all the historical evidence today by any scholar, even the most atheistic today, threw that out. They said the 70s Jesus seminar, historical Jesus, was a joke.
Absolutely, yeah.
Total joke. So, well, you brought that up a little earlier, though, and that's connected to this reliability of the Gospels. And so I'm just saying, be careful with that. Because they would also say something like, oh, Jesus didn't really resurrect. Yes, he died, but really his body was thrown into a mass grave and some dogs came along and ate it. That's what they said. But we have Joseph of Arimathea, who would have been the top dog at the Sanhedrin, the last one to have actually taken Jesus Christ and buried him in a grave. But he said, wow, this truly is the Son of God. I'm going to take him and bury him in this grave. And he rose three days later. And so you have Nicodemus, who's also the top dog in the Jewish Sanhedrin. He would be the last one to do it as well. These guys are giving over their reputations entirely because they're starting to realize, wow, he truly is the Son of God.
Certainly.
So you got to watch your emotional bias, I would say. We all have emotional biases more than we realize.
Yeah.
And start to doubt those doubts. And say, wow, why am I doubting? What am I falling into? Is it something here that I don't like that Jesus claims? Or is it truly, no, I'm following the evidence, I believe. And I don't believe that he did literally claim to be God. And I don't believe the evidence shows that he did resurrect. And I don't believe that the early church popped into existence and took over almost the whole Roman Empire based off of a true story. No, it's this giant hoax, and I know many people were going to their death for it. But I don't know what happened, but I just don't believe it really occurred. No one has given a good explanation for these things, though, from a naturalistic perspective or from a historical perspective.
Certainly, that's my apologies if I miscommunicate. I'm
No,
not
no.
trying to say I do know what Jesus didn't say or what he. I just would say it's what I'm trying to say is that these are biographies and are based on either eyewitness accounts or oral traditions. And there can be even with eyewitness accounts we have in courts and stuff, details change. People may forget some things. So I'm not trying to say I know what Jesus didn't say or what he's like, or I don't like he said this or whatever.
But the range of details and the differences that we bring to a court of law based off of some type of, if we're both detectives to a crime scene, our testimonies will be different. And when historical scholars see differences in ancient manuscripts, they say, that probably happened. If they don't see differences, they say, collusion. That did not happen. And so eyewitness testimony is still taken as the #1 piece of evidence, even more so than DNA evidence today. And so even if we had DNA evidence from Jesus' body back then, that would not be stronger than eyewitness testimony.
And I mean, certainly there's independent attestation in the Gospels, which really does show that I totally believe Jesus was 100% historical figure. I don't know exactly everything that happened other than outside Paul and the Gospels, really. But
All right, let me ask you a question. If I am right that Jesus Christ loves you and me and that he offers us eternal life, if I believe in him, I go to heaven.
yes,
If you reject him, you go to hell.
yes,
Now, I don't think that's a good reason for you to believe in Jesus, but I think it's a great reason for you to study the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, in order to figure out, is he reliable or not? Does that make sense?
absolutely. No, I have much more studying of the Gospels to do, especially after this conversation. You guys brought up a lot of great points.
It's only 140 pages, so don't worry. It's just Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, about 140 pages. You're a very thoughtful guy. You owe it to yourself as a thinking human being to read those Gospels and then to ascertain, does the evidence point to me being able to trust Jesus, or is there, the evidence points to me not being able to trust Jesus? Now remember, the mistake that I listen to on a regular basis is, well, there's not enough evidence. There's some evidence for Christ, but there's not enough. Okay, but here's the mistake, and that one is. Okay, fine. So what you're telling me is, here's my standard of evidence. The evidence for Christ falls short of that. No problem so far. But now what you got to tell me is, who or what are you living for? And secondly, what is the evidence that whatever you're living for, whoever you're living for, is true? And sir, the answer that I've gotten to those two questions for 44 years of speaking on some of the finest campuses in the United States is scary. Scary. Yeah, we can be skeptics, and skepticism is very important. Otherwise, we'll get ripped off and burned, right?
Absolutely.
But we can't be hyper-skeptics, because otherwise, if we're hyper-skeptics, I'll never trust you.
Yeah, I'm just an alien man.
Yeah, you're just an alien man. And you can't trust me, because for all you know, I'm just trying to manipulate you, all right? But no, I have grown to respect you more and more as I've listened to you articulate and speech. Hopefully you're learning to respect us a little more for our reasonable talk. Okay, so that's the way we build relationships, right? We can't prove each other, but we gather evidence that this person is reliable, and then we trust the person and we build a friendship. Well, that's what Jesus Christ wants with every single one of us. He says, here's the evidence that I'm reliable, I really do love you, and I really want to give you life with God today and eternal life in heaven. Now trust in me. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
You've been a delight. You've made my day, let me tell
My
you.
day, too. I've been waiting for this for so long.
Good to meet you.
Good to meet you too, man. Thank you. Thank you so
Good to
much,
see you,
man.
man.